The clock on the dashboard said 2:17 p.m. when the gas light came on, and that's when my stomach made that hollow, sour noise that feels louder than it should. We'd been driving for hours, no service, no towns, just trees, and that thin gray road that looks the same no matter how long you stare at it. My partner was quiet in that specific way people get when they're trying not to complain, but I could tell she was miserable. Then we saw the picnic table. It was just there, right off the road, perfectly centered in a small clearing, like someone placed it deliberately for passing cars to notice. On top of it was a basket, the kind with a fabric lining, not some cheap plastic cooler. I remember thinking it looked weirdly clean for being out there, like it hadn't been touched by dust or bugs. We slowed down, looked at each other, and neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Hunger does something strange to your judgment. We pulled over. Up close, the basket smelled like warm bread and something sweet, like cinnamon or maybe apples. Inside were wrapped sandwiches, a thermos, a jar of jam, and a folded note tucked under the handle. The note said, "For travelers, please enjoy." The residents, that was it. No smiley face, no explanation, just that. My first reaction was relief, like actual physical relief in my chest, like when you finally find a bathroom after holding it too long. My partner laughed and said, "Well, that's insanely lucky." We hesitated for maybe 10 seconds, just long enough to look around the tree line, but there was nothing there. No houses, no trails, no smoke, no cars. We told ourselves it was probably some local tradition or a kindness thing. The food looked homemade, still warm, and we were starving. So we ate. I remember thinking how good everything tasted in a way that almost felt unfair, like it was too good for being found on the side of the road. The bread was soft, the meat still warm, the jam thick and sweet, like someone had just sealed the jar that morning. My partner kept saying, "This is unreal," between bites, half laughing, half in disbelief. We both joked about how we'd probably get food poisoning for trusting strangers, but neither of us slowed down. There was something about the quiet, too. No wind, no birds, not even insects buzzing around the food, which should have been swarming it. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. I noticed that and tried to ignore it, because when you're hungry, your brain will excuse almost anything. We wiped our hands on napkins from the basket and started packing things back the way we found them. That's when we decided we should leave something behind, like money or a note, just to not feel like thieves. We were walking back to the car when I heard the engine click instead of turn over. You know that sound, that dull, empty click that tells you your day is about to get worse. I tried again. Same sound. My partner groaned and leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed, like she could physically will the car to start. We popped the hood even though neither of us really knows what we're doing in there, just staring at parts and pretending. The phone still had no service. The sun felt higher than it should have been for how long we'd been driving, like time was stretching or compressing in a way I couldn't measure. We decided to sit for a minute, cool off and think. That's when my partner said very quietly, "Hey, look behind us." I turned slowly, mostly because I expected nothing and didn't want to scare myself for no reason. Through the rear window, I could see the picnic table again, but it didn't look the same anymore. At first, I thought it was just the angle, or my eyes adjusting to the light. Then I realized there were people sitting on the benches, Not walking around, not talking, just already seated, like they'd been there the whole time, and we somehow missed it. There were a lot of them, more than would fit comfortably, but they made it work by sitting close, shoulders touching. No one was eating. The basket was still on the table, closed now. Every single face was turned toward the car. I couldn't see details clearly, just shapes and posture and the fact that no one was moving. My partner whispered, were they there before? And I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know. I rolled the window down a few inches, not enough to commit to anything, just enough to feel less trapped. The air outside felt cooler, heavier somehow, like the shade under dense trees, even though the sun was still bright. I thought about waving. I actually lifted my hand, then stopped halfway, because the idea of acknowledging them felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. None of them waved or smiled or did anything to signal friendliness. They just watched. I noticed then that they were sitting in a very neat line, evenly spaced, hands folded on laps or resting flat on the table. It reminded me of people waiting for a bus that's late, that shared patient annoyance. Except there was no road behind them, no sign, no reason to wait there at all. My partner asked if I thought they were the residents from the note, and even saying that word out loud made my stomach tighten again. I tried the ignition again, harder this time, like effort alone could fix mechanical failure. The engine didn't even click anymore. It was just dead, no sound at all. My partner suggested we get out and talk to them, ask for help. Maybe someone had jumper cables or a phone. The idea made my skin crawl, but I couldn't justify staying inside forever either. Still, neither of us opened the door. We just sat there, watching them through the glass, pretending we were thinking logically when really we were just scared. I noticed then that there were more people than before. I hadn't seen anyone walk in, but somehow the benches looked fuller. I couldn't explain how I knew that without sounding insane, but it felt true in my gut. They weren't blinking much, if at all. Their eyes stayed fixed on the car like it was the only thing in the world. My partner whispered that she felt like we'd interrupted something, that this wasn't meant for us the way we thought it was. I asked her what she meant, and she said she didn't know, just that it felt like we'd shown up too early or too late, but definitely at the wrong time. I started sweating, even though the air inside the car wasn't hot anymore. My mouth felt dry, like I'd been talking nonstop, even though I hadn't said much. I kept thinking about the food, how good it tasted, how warm it was, how fresh. I wondered how long it had been sitting there before we arrived. I wondered who made it. And I wondered, suddenly and uncomfortably, if it had ever been meant for people like us at all. One of them stood up. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just slowly, like standing from a long dinner. The rest stayed seated. The person walked around the table and stopped a few steps behind it, still facing us. They didn't come closer, didn't wave, didn't shout. They just stood there. My partner grabbed my arm so hard it hurt, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The silence was loud now, like that ringing you get in your ears after a loud noise, except nothing had made it. I tried the horn without thinking. It made a weak sound, like it didn't want to be used. No reaction, no flinching, no change in posture. The standing person tilted their head slightly, not in curiosity, more like adjustment, like aligning their view. I started feeling this heavy pressure in my chest, like something was pushing inward, slow and steady. My partner said she felt sick, like she might throw up, and then she went quiet, staring straight ahead. I followed her gaze and realized more people were standing now, but I hadn't seen them rise. They were just up, still facing us, still silent. No phones, no bags, no kids, no signs of travel at all. It felt like we were the only moving things in a frozen scene, except we weren't really moving either. I thought about getting out again, just to break whatever this was, but the idea felt as dangerous as stepping into traffic blindfolded. So we stayed and waited. I don't know how long we sat there like that. Minutes maybe, or longer. Time felt wrong, like it was folding in on itself instead of moving forward. At some point I noticed the basket on the table again. It was open now. The food was gone. All of it. Even the napkins we used. The table looked wiped clean, like nothing had ever been there at all. My stomach twisted, not from hunger this time, but from a cold, hollow feeling that settled deep and stayed. The people were still there, though, still watching, still silent. My partner whispered, "I think they're waiting," and didn't say what for. I didn't ask. The pressure in my chest eased slightly, but only enough to make room for something worse. Then, without any warning or build-up, the car started. The engine turned over like it had never been dead. No stutter, no struggle, just normal. The sound felt wrong, like a joke with bad timing. Neither of us spoke. I put the car in drive and pulled forward, slowly at first, half expecting someone to step into the road. No one did. As we passed the clearing, I looked back one last time. The table was still there. The basket was gone. The benches were empty. No people, no movement. Just trees and shadows and a patch of flattened grass where they'd been sitting. We drove until the road changed, until the trees thinned, until the world felt loud again. Neither of us ever talked about it after that. Not really. It just stopped. Story 2. I dropped my keys in the leaves when I tried to unlock my car, and the sound was louder than it should have been, like the woods were amplifying it just to mess with me. My hands were shaking from cold and frustration, and I remember thinking, great, this is how horror movies start, over something stupid like keys. The trailhead sign behind me was half rotted, the letters barely readable, and my phone had already lost signal 10 minutes earlier. I crouched down, brushing wet leaves aside, and that's when I felt eyes on me. Not in a dramatic way, more like that subtle pressure you feel when someone's standing too close behind you in a line. I stood up slowly, heart already speeding up before I even knew why. That's when I saw the dog. He was standing just inside the tree line, not moving, not barking, just watching me, like I'd interrupted something. He was old. You could tell right away. His coat was patchy, gray around the muzzle, ribs faintly visible under loose skin, like he'd been thin for a long time, but somehow still going. One ear flopped lower than the other, and his tail hung straight down, not tucked, not wagging. He didn't look aggressive, but he didn't look friendly either, more like patient. I said something dumb like, "Hey boy," mostly to break the silence, mostly to prove I wasn't alone out there. He blinked once, slow, then turned his body sideways, just enough to show me a narrow gap between two trees. And then he started walking, not running, not waiting, just walking like it was obvious I was supposed to follow. I told myself I was just following him to get to a road or a house, or literally anything that wasn't more forest. The ground dipped and rose in weird ways, like the land itself was tired, and my knees were starting to feel it. The dog kept a steady pace, never speeding up, never slowing down, always just far enough ahead that I had to stay focused. I tried calling out again, asking if he belonged to anyone, which felt ridiculous the second the words left my mouth. He didn't react. Not a twitch of the ears, not a glance back. At one point I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing. No movement, no sound. Just trees and the soft crunch of my own shoes. That's when I realized the forest didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. The light started changing, that late afternoon kind where everything goes dull and gray at the edges, like the color is draining out of the world. I noticed my breathing was loud, uneven, and my chest felt tight in a way that wasn't just from walking. The dog veered slightly left, down a narrow slope, and the smell of smoke got stronger, mixed with something sour like old clothes that had been wet too long. My stomach twisted, but not in a hungry way. More like my body already knew something I didn't. The trees opened up just enough for me to see a small cabin ahead, a single yellow light glowing in one window. It looked real in a way nothing else had all day. Solid, warm, safe. I felt this stupid rush of relief, like I might actually sit down somewhere that wasn't a rock or a log. The dog slowed as we got closer, his paws making almost no sound on the dirt, like he was careful not to announce himself. The cabin was smaller than it looked from a distance, crooked in that way old buildings get when the ground shifts under them. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, casting long shadows across the steps. I noticed there were no other lights, no sounds from inside, no music, no TV, nothing. Just that one square of yellow. My mouth was dry and my tongue felt thick, like it didn't belong in my mouth anymore. I opened my lips to say something to the dog, but he stopped walking. Completely, froze in place. He turned his head just enough for me to see his profile, and that's when he barked. Just once, loud, sharp. It echoed off the trees in a way that felt wrong, like the sound didn't know where to go. Then, without waiting, he turned and ran straight back into the woods, disappearing so fast it was like he'd been pulled into the dark. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the spot where he'd been, half expecting him to come back. He didn't. The woods swallowed the sound, and suddenly it was just me and the cabin. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel safe. I felt delivered. I stood there longer than I want to admit, just staring at the door, like it might open on its own if I waited. My legs were sore, my back ached, and the cold was starting to settle into my fingers, that deep kind you can't shake off by rubbing your hands together. I could have turned around. That thought came and went fast, like a joke I didn't laugh at. Instead, I walked up the steps, each one creaking in a different way, and knocked. The sound felt too loud, like I was announcing myself to something that already knew I was there. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps inside, slow, unhurried, the kind of footsteps that don't belong to someone rushing to help. The door opened just enough for a man's face to appear in the gap. He was older, maybe late 60s, maybe more, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth, like his face had been folded too many times. He didn't look surprised to see me, not even a little. His eyes flicked past me, toward the trees, like he was checking something behind my shoulder. Then he nodded once, like something had just gone according to plan. "Ah," he said softly, almost fondly. "Judge is working again." I opened my mouth to ask who Judge was, but he stepped back, holding the door wider. "Come in," he said. "You're his dinner. And he gets real upset if I interfere." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. My brain did that thing where it tries to turn words into something less threatening. Like maybe he meant dinner in a joke way, or maybe Judge was some weird nickname for the stove or something. But the way he said it, calm, flat, like he was commenting on the weather. My mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and uneven, and my hands felt numb, like they weren't fully attached to my body anymore. I took a small step back without really meaning to, my heel slipping on the porch board. The man's eyes followed the movement, slow and steady. Not angry, not excited, just observant. "You're safe for now," he added, like that was supposed to help. Inside, the cabin smelled like smoke and something else I couldn't place. Something old and stale, like dust and sweat and damp wood all mixed together. There was a small table near the center of the room with 2 chairs, one pulled out like someone had just stood up. A pot was simmering on the stove, the lid rattling softly, and I had this sudden, irrational urge to apologize for interrupting whatever was happening. My brain kept trying to find a normal explanation, something that fit into the world I understood, but nothing would settle. The man closed the door behind me, and the sound of the latch sliding into place made my stomach drop. He didn't lock it. That somehow felt worse. He just stood there, watching me, waiting, like he wasn't worried about me leaving. I kept glancing at the door, then at the window, then back at the man, like maybe one of those things would suddenly make sense if I looked at it long enough. He didn't move much, just leaned slightly against the wall, arms loose at his sides, breathing slow and steady. Outside, the woods had gone completely dark, and the only light was the yellow glow from the single bulb above the table. I asked him what he meant, my voice coming out thinner than I expected, like it belonged to someone else. He didn't answer right away. He just listened like he was deciding whether my question mattered. Then he said, "Judge brings me what he finds. What wanders too far? What doesn't belong?" I told him I was lost, that I just needed directions. Maybe a phone, anything. My words started tripping over each other, the way they do when you're trying not to panic and failing anyway. He nodded once, slow, like he'd heard that exact sentence 100 times before. "They always are," he said. "Lost." There was no judgment in his voice, no sympathy either, just fact. I heard something outside then, not footsteps, not a growl, more like the sound of something heavy brushing against the side of the cabin, slow and deliberate, like it was circling. My skin prickled all over, like my body was reacting before my brain could catch up. The man didn't look toward the sound. He didn't need to. The light flickered once, then steadied again, and the room felt smaller somehow, like the walls had moved in when I wasn't looking. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was in the chair, my hands resting on my knees, fingers locked together, so tight they hurt. My chest felt tight, my breaths shallow, like I was afraid to take up too much air. The man went to the stove, lifted the lid, and stirred the pot slowly, carefully, like he had all the time in the world. The sound outside came again, closer this time, followed by a low, steady panting that made my stomach twist. He glanced at the door, then back at me. "He's early tonight," he said, almost disappointed. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running. What I remember is the sound of the latch clicking open on its own, the door creaking inward, and the man stepping calmly out of the way, like he was making room for something important. I remember the smell first, strong and animal and wet, and then the weight of the silence that followed, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. The light went out. Not suddenly, just a soft, final pop, like a bulb giving up. After that, there were sounds I can't really explain without lying about them, so I won't. And then, there weren't. Everything just stopped. Story 3. The zipper on my pack caught on a branch at exactly 3:47. Yeah, I remember because I just checked my phone to see how much daylight we had left, and the screen was cracked, so the numbers were all blurry in the corner. I was trying to wrestle it free when Jake stopped short ahead of me, his boots crunching twice on the gravel like he was stamping out a cigarette. "No way," he said, but not loud, more like he was talking to his own shoes. I looked up and there it was, that stupid iron post. The 42. Same rust spot shaped like Florida on the left side. Same bent top that looked like someone had tried to pull it out with a truck chain. My stomach did this weird flip, the kind you get when you miss a step in the dark. We'd passed it 2 hours ago. I knew we'd passed it because I'd pissed on a tree 10 feet past it while the others were adjusting their socks. Dave laughed first, that nervous bark he always did when he was scared of looking stupid in front of his older brother. "GPS is messed up, that's all," he said, fumbling with his phone, but his hands were shaking enough that he dropped it in the dirt. Sarah didn't say anything. She just stood there with her water bottle halfway to her mouth, not drinking, just staring at that number like it was going to change if she blinked hard enough. I remember the wind stopped right then, like someone hit a mute button on the forest. Even the bugs went quiet. Jake started walking again, faster this time, almost running, and we followed because what else do you do? You keep moving. You tell yourself your compass is broken, or the trail loops back in some weird way you didn't notice on the map. But I kept looking back over my shoulder at that post until the trees swallowed it up, and my neck hurt for 3 days after from twisting it so hard. My boots were rubbing raw spots on both heels by the time we hit that clearing again. You know, that hot sting that makes you walk funny? I checked my watch, and it was 5:15, which made no sense because the sun was sitting lower than it should have been for that time, or maybe I was just dizzy. Jake was breathing hard through his nose, that angry bull sound he made when he was about to lose it, and Sarah kept saying stop, just stop, but nobody was moving anyway. We stood in a circle like idiots, looking at that damn 42 post like it was going to explain itself, and I noticed my piss stain was still on the tree trunk, dark brown now against the bark. Dave sat down right in the middle of the path, legs splayed out like a kid who'd given up on a hike, and he kept muttering about parallel trails, about how state parks sometimes mark different loops with the same numbers. But I knew. We all knew. I'd carved a little X in the wood with my pocket knife 2 hours ago, and there it was, fresh white sap still oozing out of the cut. My mouth tasted like copper pennies. The 4th time I heard it before I saw it. This weird tapping, like wet cloth flapping in wind. Except there wasn't any wind, just that dead stillness that makes your ears ring. We came around the bend and I froze because the 42 looked wrong, crooked, and there was something dark smeared across the metal that looked like rust but wasn't. Too red-brown, too thick, drying in cracks. I didn't remember being there. Then I saw the glove. Yellow nylon, the cheap kind from Walmart, hanging off the top spike by its finger like some kind of flag. Dave made this noise, this high whine in his throat, because it was his glove, the left one he'd lost at the stream crossing when he slipped on a rock. And that was miles back, hours ago. We'd all seen him take it off to wring out his sleeve. I stepped closer, and my legs felt like they were full of sand, heavy and drifting. And that's when Sarah pointed ahead, her arm shaking so bad I could hear her jacket sleeve rustling. There, 20 feet up the trail, clean and straight and waiting, stood another 42 post. The real one, ours, with my piss stain still wet on the pine beside it. I just stood there with my mouth open, tasting that penny taste again, thicker now, like I'd swallowed a handful of change. Jake started walking toward the new marker, the bloody one, and I wanted to yell at him to stop, but my throat was locked up tight, dry as the gravel under my boots. He reached out to touch the glove, and Dave screamed at him. Actually screamed, "Don't you fucking touch it." And Jake jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. Sarah was crying now, not loud sobbing, but these quiet leaks down her face, her breath hitching in little catches that sounded almost like hiccups. I kept looking between the two posts, back and forth, trying to see which one was breathing or which one was the lie, but they both looked solid, real, impossible. My watch said 5:22 now, 7 minutes since the last time I checked, but the shadows had grown long enough to reach my boots, stretching toward us like fingers. I said, "We need to go," but it came out as a whisper, barely there, and nobody moved anyway, stuck in that clearing like we were nailed to the dirt. We went for the clean one, the original, because what else do you pick when you have a choice between a bloody glove and your own piss stain? I walked backwards for the first 10 feet, watching the bad marker until the trees hit it, expecting to see it move or blink or something, but it just stood there with that glove waving slightly, barely, like it was saying goodbye. The path felt longer this time, steeper, though I knew it was flat, my thighs burning like we'd been climbing for hours. Dave kept stopping to look at his bare left hand, turning it over and over, like he expected to see the glove magically appear back on it, muttering about hypothermia and shared hallucinations from bad trail mix. Sarah wouldn't let go of my pack strap, her fingers digging into the mesh, and I could feel every individual knuckle pressing against my spine. The sun was wrong. It was sitting too low, burning this weird orange that made everything look like an old photograph, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard a bird. Not a crow, not a sparrow, nothing. Just our breathing and the crunch of boots that sounded too loud, like we were walking on potato chips. "We gotta go back," Jake said, grabbing my arm with fingers that dug in too hard, leaving white marks that turned red slow. "Back to the parking lot, back the way we came, fuck this trail." Nobody argued. We turned around, all four of us spinning in the dirt like we were on a lazy Susan, and started walking the direction we'd come from, away from the backwards water, away from the glove sitting on that rock like a gift we didn't want. But the trees looked different going this way, thicker, the branches lower, scratching at our faces like they were trying to push us back, and the path narrowed until we were walking single file, Sarah in front with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though it was still warm, sticky warm. I kept looking at the sky, waiting for the sun to drop, but it just hung there, bleeding orange light that made everything look like it was on fire, and I realized I couldn't feel my feet anymore. Just this numb thumping with every step. Then Sarah stopped so sudden I walked into her back, and I looked up and there they were, both posts. The clean one and the bloody one, standing side by side now, 10 feet apart, like they'd been waiting for us to come back. The glove was still on the left one, but now it was on the ground too. The one from the rock, both gloves, left and right, bookending that rusted iron 42 like parentheses. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly my ass was in the dirt, pine needles poking through my jeans, and I was staring at those 2 markers like they were the only things in the world. Everything else just blurred out at the edges. Dave was hyperventilating, that paper bag sound without the bag, and Jake was turning in slow circles, looking at the trees, the sky, the ground, like he was trying to find a seam he could peel open. Sarah sat down next to me, close enough that her shoulder pressed against mine, and she was whispering something under her breath, maybe a prayer or maybe just counting. I couldn't tell, her lips moving too fast. I wanted to check my phone again, but I knew it was dead, knew it deep in my gut, like I knew my own name. And when I looked at my hands, they looked wrong too pale, the veins standing out blue and angry. The silence came back, that heavy blanket muting everything, and I realized we weren't breathing loud anymore. We were all holding our breath, waiting for the next thing to happen, for the posts to move or speak or multiply again. But they just stood there, 2 rusted sentinels in the bleeding light, and somewhere in the distance I heard water again, that backward sucking sound getting closer. My legs cramped when I tried to stand, that Charlie horse seize that makes you want to scream, but I bit it back and tasted blood from where I'd chewed my cheek. Jake was already up, pulling at Dave's collar like he was a puppy. Get up, we can't sit here." But his voice was flat, monotone, like he was reading a grocery list instead of trying to save us. I grabbed Sarah's hand and it was ice, corpse cold, and she looked at me with eyes too wide, whites showing all around. "Which way?" she kept asking. Which way?" Like it was all one word, one breath. I pointed away from the posts, just away, anywhere but toward those iron numbers, and we stumbled forward, legs stiff from sitting, boots heavy as concrete blocks dragging through soup. The trees pressed closer, branches scratching my arms, leaving thin white lines that didn't bleed, didn't even hurt, just sat there on my skin like drawings in pencil. I kept counting steps in my head, 1, 2, 3, 4, trying to anchor myself to something real, but the numbers kept slipping, turning into 13-14-15 and back to 1, 2, and I couldn't remember if we'd walked 10 feet or 10 miles when the ground changed. Then the gravel shifted, suddenly no transition, just dirt under my boots instead of pebbles, soft and black like potting soil, and the smell hit me, rich and wrong like a greenhouse full of rotting tomatoes. Dave stopped again, and I almost ran into him, and when I looked around I saw we were back at the clearing, but the posts were gone, both of them, just empty space where they'd stood, grass flattened in 2 dark rectangles. My stomach dropped out, that elevator fall feeling, and I turned in a circle, slow, looking for the iron, the blood, the gloves, but there was just forest, normal forest, birds suddenly loud again, screaming in the trees like they'd never left. Sarah laughed, this high, hysterical giggle. "It's over, it left, we're okay." But I knew it wasn't over because my watch still said 5:22, the cracked screen frozen. And when I looked at my hands, the scratches from the branches were gone, smooth skin, no white lines, no proof. Jake sat down hard, not in dirt, but on something, and I heard the metal clink, saw the iron post rising up from the ground behind him, clean and straight and numbered 42, and he didn't even see it, just sat there with his head in his hands, rocking back and forth while the shadow of the marker stretched across his shoulders like an arm. I tapped Jake's shoulder, but my finger felt numb, like I was touching him through a thick glove, and he didn't look up, just kept rocking, the metal post digging into his back, but he didn't flinch, didn't seem to feel it at all. I wanted to scream at him, to move, to run, to do something, but my throat was full of that copper taste again, thick and choking, and when I opened my mouth, no sound came out, not even air. Sarah stopped laughing, just stood there with her hand over her mouth, eyes dry now, too dry, staring at the number 42 over Jake's shoulder, like she was reading it for the first time or the last time. Dave backed away, one step, two, his boots crunching loud on the gravel that was back now, the black dirt gone like it had never been, and I heard him whisper, "No, no, no," but it was barely audible, drowned out by the ringing in my own ears. The sun was still hanging there, bleeding out that orange light, and I realized I couldn't feel my heartbeat anymore. Couldn't feel anything except the cold spreading up from my feet, slow and certain as frost on a window. I looked down at my boots, and they were dusty, covered in that gray trail dust. But underneath, I could see the laces were tied wrong, left over right instead of my usual knot, and I knew I hadn't tied them that way. Knew it like I knew my own name, but I couldn't remember when I'd tied them at all. Jake finally stopped rocking, his head coming up slow, and he looked at me with eyes that looked like holes, empty, and he said, "It's warm," but his breath fogged in the air like winter. I tried to look away from the post, but my neck wouldn't turn, locked in place, staring at that rust spot shaped like Florida, while the silence pressed down on us heavy as a hand. I don't know how long we stayed like that, minutes or hours, the four of us frozen in that clearing while the orange light just sat there, unchanging, burning without heat. Jake started humming at some point, some song I almost recognized but couldn't name, the tune breaking up in his throat like bad radio static. Sarah lowered her hand from her mouth, and it hung there at her side, limp, fingers slightly curled like the glove on the post, the one that was back now, hanging from the number 4, yellow nylon catching light that shouldn't exist. I tried to lift my foot to step back, to break whatever this was, but my boot felt nailed to the gravel, rooted deep as the iron post itself, and I didn't even try to fight it. Didn't have the strength or the will. Dave stopped whispering, just breathed, shallow and fast, the only sound in the world besides Jake's broken humming. The birds had gone quiet again, or maybe they'd never come back, and I could see my breath now, white clouds in front of my face while the sun stayed stuck at that wrong angle, leading out the day that wouldn't end. I thought about my car keys in my pocket, heavy and useless. Thought about the drive home that wasn't going to happen, and then I stopped thinking altogether. We just stood there, breathing fog in the warm air, while the marker stood watch behind Jake, and the trail went on in both directions, and the afternoon stayed stuck at 5:22, and nothing else happened. Nothing at all.